What's going on? This is our second homework for Unit 5. So remember, Unit 5 is all about cognition, our thinking. So we're continuing our discussion of memory, okay? So today, we're going to talk about storage and retrieval. So the first homework video is all about encoding and a kind of overview of how we get memories into our brain. Today's about what happens next. So hopefully in class, we revisited the 3 types of memory, and hopefully in class, we talked about how you have sensory memory, working memory, and long-term memory. So sensory memory, what's in your senses around you. Working memory, what you're paying attention to and thinking about. And then long-term memory, stuff that is deep in your brain that you can access when you need to. Okay? So today, we're going to kind of go over those in detail. All right? Hopefully in class, we also talk about things that can go wrong with storage. We may have watched some videos or we'll watch them at some point. But for now, we're going to get deeper into those 3 specific types of memory storage. So the first kind is called sensory memory. The guy who came up with it, his name is George Sperling. So I associate the S in Sperling with the S in sensory memory. And what he realized was that there's a lot of things around us that our brain can take in, visually and in terms of sound. And sometimes, if we close our eyes for a quick second, I can still picture the blue flag that's in the back of my classroom. Or sometimes, when you hear somebody say something, for just a couple seconds after they're done talking, you can almost like replay the sound. Sperling called this sensory memory. We experience sensation just for a little bit of time after the actual thing, the thing we're looking at or the thing we're hearing, after it's gone. Okay? So that's with an echo. Let me give you an example. You're in class, you're playing on your phone, okay? All of a sudden, the teacher asks you a question. You were not listening, but you can close your eyes real quick and replay the last few seconds, and you can answer the teacher's question, right? What you are doing is you are relying on your sensory memory. It's almost like there's an echo still in your brain of what was just said. And for the visual stuff, we call it, so auditory echo. For the visual stuff, we say that for about half a second after you look at something, it's still there. It's like it's almost still on your retina, on your eyeball. So it lasts for just a second. Something to note about sensory memory is they say that it has a large capacity, almost an unlimited capacity, meaning your senses can take in a lot of information. There can be lots of sounds and visuals from all around you that your brain is capable of like taking in, but only for a half second or only for a few seconds, okay? If you want something to last longer than that, you're gonna actually have to pay attention to it. So there's lots of things going on around you, large capacity of stuff in your visual field or stuff that you can hear. That's all your sensory memory. Working memory is when you're actually paying attention to things. So see if you can answer these 4 quick questions already about sensory memory. Now, sensory input, what's in the world around you, sensory memory. The filter here is whether or not you're paying attention to things. When you start paying attention to something, whether it's visual or whether it's a sound, we call that your working memory. Mentioned in the last video, George Miller said that you can remember about 7 things. We'll do a little activity with this in class, plus or minus 2. And the way that you pay attention to things, there's 2 options. You can either pay attention to the sound, phone, P-H-O-N, phonics, phonetics. This has to do with sound, so I'm drawing little musical notes there to remind me of sound or headphones. Phonological loop, or you can visualize something. You can picture something. Visuo has to do with being able to picture or see it in your mind, okay? So for number 1, the phonological loop. When we did our activity in class on Monday, Tuesday, with so-and-so walking on the roof and so-and-so picking up the egg, some of y'all repeated to yourself, John walked on the roof, Bill picked up the egg, John on the roof, Bill with the egg, John, roof, Bill, egg, John, roof, Bill, egg. What you are doing, repeating things in your mind, that is your phonological loop. It's a sound loop in your mind. Now, others of you, you pictured, you're like, okay, I know a guy named John, John J. from Hamilton. I can picture John. I can picture him on a roof. And you're like, okay, Bill. Like, oh, my dad has a buddy named Bill. I'm going to picture that guy picking up an egg. John on the roof, Bill on the egg. If you visualize something, you're using your sketch pad. These are the two ways you can pay attention to things, through sound or through vision. Okay. Now, some stuff, if you pay attention to it enough, if you practice it enough with rehearsal and maintenance, it will move from your working memory into a permanent part of your brain where it will be for a very long time. We call that long-term memory. For something to get into your long-term memory, neurons have to change. Dendrites and axons have to rewire. The fancy name for this, put a star by this phrase, is long-term potentiation. Potentiation looks like the word potential, meaning having to do with an action potential. The idea here is that when these same neurons fire again and again and again, they will become wired. They become associated. They become clustered together in a network that will help you activate them again in the future. That's what memory is, right? When you've learned so much about George Washington or Abraham Lincoln, those neurons in your brain have fired again and again and again and again, and now just like certain things pop into your mind when you think about Abraham Lincoln. You think about the Emancipation Proclamation or the Civil War or his top hat or the year 1860, but those neurons have fired together. That's what long-term memory is. Another word for this is consolidation. To consolidate means to bring together neurons and memories and ideas, these neural pathways, they are being brought together so that in the future you can recall this information and bring these memories back out. That's why some stuff lasts in your brain. Neurons have fired and wired together, and now when the Abraham Lincoln neuron fires, the Emancipation Proclamation, and maybe the 13th Amendment, those neurons, all those other similar thoughts, the things that have to do with Abraham Lincoln, they all fire as well, and that's what long-term memory is. Check for understanding. Make sure you can answer these 6 questions about working memory, your short-term memory, as well as your long-term memory. Potentiation, action potentials, neurons. Make sure you understand what's happening with these. Great. So we're now going to spend some time talking about different types of memories that can be in your long-term storage. Okay? So the first kind is retrospective memories. This root retro we're going to see a couple times today. Retro means old, a throwback. A retrospective memory is you remembering the past. Retro means old, throwback, the past. So, who won the Super Bowl? That's a retrospective memory. What did Mr. Jones talk about last week? That's a retrospective memory. Most of the time people talk about memories, they're referring to retrospective memories, things that happened in the past. Now, your brain does have the capability to remember for the future. What that means is like you're trying to remember something for later. Like you want in the past, you want in the future for something that's happening now to pop back into your head. Like you want to remember that when you go home, you have to walk the dog. Or today's a Tuesday, it's trash day. You better make sure that you remember to take out the trash tonight. When you were trying to remember the future, the forward, that's prospective. Progress is about the future, moving into the future. Pro always has to do with the future, the thing that happens later on or that will happen. Okay? So those are 2 different types of memories, retro and pro. Now, we're going to spend some time talking about all the different types of retrospective memories, meaning all the ways that you can remember things from the past. So if you want to take a picture of this chart, you're welcome to. I'm also going to kind of have a slide about explicit and a slide about implicit memories. But here's kind of the idea. When you've learned something in the past, there are some things you've learned that you can declare and explain. We call them the explicit memories. You don't need to write this down now. It'll be on the next slide. But you can explain things from your life, what you had for breakfast, what you did over the weekend, what happened for your 5th birthday. Right? Those are things you can explain and declare that are unique to you. You are also capable of explaining and declaring things that are true for everybody. the lyrics to 24 Karat Magic, why the year 1776 is so important, the Buffalo Bills starting quarterback. Those are just like things you can look up online, things that are on Wikipedia. Both Wikipedia stuff, facts about history, general knowledge, and things from your life are explicit memories that you can declare, that you can explain to somebody. You also have memories that you can't really explain. Maybe you have a certain fear of a certain object or place. Maybe you have experienced classical conditioning where you have a reflex to a certain sound or stimulus. Maybe you have a skill. You know how to ride a bike or play an instrument or do some sort of athletic feat, throwing or hitting. Those memories are implicit. These are like your muscle memories. Things that, like, if you're asked how to tie your shoe or sign your name or ride a bike, you would not really be able to explain it. They are non-declarative. They're more about procedures and things that your body does. So 2 different types of retrospective memory. So now if you want to write things down, the blue type over here on the left, these are your explicit memories in your hippocampus. Okay? And I said these can be true things that you could look up online that are true for everybody. Here's this word again, semantic. To have meaning for everybody. A national anthem, right? A math formula. Facts that everyone agrees with. And then number 2 down here, these are like episodes in your life. Things that are unique to you. A birthday party, a meal, a moment from the weekend. All of these types of memories are explicit declarative. You could explain them to somebody, and it's your hippocampus that processes these. Graphic. Declarative memories. Factual things, true for everybody. Episodes in your life that are powerful, like this first kiss. The green memories, implicit. Now, if you want to write these down, implicit memories are like muscle memories, also called procedural memories. It's things like riding a bike. Okay? Now, if you were asked to label the parts of a bike, handlebars, pedals, spokes, wheels, seat, the parts of a bike, that's explanatory. Those are explicit. But the actual skill of riding a bike, you can't just explain that to someone. They have to experience it for themselves. So implicit memories are muscle memories, and they're in the cerebellum. It can be a way you feel about a certain person. It's hard to explain. That's an implicit memory. Classical conditioning. It was a reflex. I just acted. I just responded. I couldn't control it. That's a procedural, implicit muscle memory from your cerebellum. Okay? 2 different types of memories, implicit and explicit. You need to pause it. You need to go back and look at that chart. Okay? We're going to do this in class. I know it's kind of hard to see. I don't know if zooming in would help or not. But you should be able to answer these questions here. So what it has on the right are different types of tasks. Yeah, let's go ahead and maybe pause it and see if you can do this here. Different types of tasks, like writing your name. Okay? Is writing your name, is that something that you can explain exactly how you write your name? Not really. It's more of a muscle memory. We'd say that's a procedural memory. Whereas words to a national anthem, song lyrics, well, that is a fact. It's true for everybody. You could look it up online. It has universal meaning. That's a semantic memory. Okay. E, priming, is when I get you set up to think a certain way. Okay. So setting someone up. Conditioning, we talked about all last unit, just about learning. So conditioning, that's going to be like a reflex. And then prospective memories, we just talked about those. That's when you want to remember something in the future, something going forward. So maybe see how you can do with these. We'll go over them in class as well. Okay? Pause it. It's just a little matching exercise. Good luck to you. Another check for understanding. Make sure you can answer these questions. So, the stuff's in your brain. You have these explicit memories, for example, these facts rattling around up in here. How do we get them out? Let's talk about retrieval. 3 ways that we can test your retrieval. We can give you a recall test, which is when you don't get any support or hints or cues or help. You just got to try and remember the information. I could also give you a recognition test, which is when I give you some cues. Maybe it's like a word bank, right? Or some sort of hint. And then we can also measure your relearning, meaning how long it takes you to relearn something you used to know. But like, let's do an example here. If I just straight up ask you to name the states that border the Atlantic Ocean, this is a recall test. Do it. Pause it. See how you do. How many can you remember? Just do recall. Picture the Atlantic Ocean and try and come up with the names of those states. It's tough. Now, what if I give you this? This is a cue. This is a hint cue, C-U-E. Something meant to help you out a little bit, right? Well, these all stand for different states, right? So maybe C, you would not have remembered Connecticut on your own. You would not have remembered Delaware on your own. But, oh my gosh, these are the first letters of all the states that border the Atlantic Ocean. I bet you can now get some right that maybe you couldn't get originally. We'll go over these in class, but test your memory. See what you can recognize now that you've had some hints, what you can recall. All right? Where you learned something actually impacts your ability to recall it, which is kind of interesting. There's something called mood congruent memory. When you are happy, you remember other happy things. When you are sad, the reason why depression is so hard, it slows your brain down. When you are sad, when you are depressed, your brain only thinks about other moments in your life when you were sad and depressed. It kind of makes things worse. We call this mood congruent memory. When you're in a good mood, when you're laughing, you remember other funny things. When you're sad, you remember sad things. Your mood impacts your memory. Additionally, the state you were in, your physical state, meaning if you were sleepy or if you were on some kind of medication, right? So we have a lot of folks in the school who take ADHD medicine, right? They take a stimulant to help with their ADHD. If they have not been taking their medicine all year, and then they take their medicine the day of the test, it actually isn't going to help them as much as if they were taking their medicine all year long. The reason why is what is learned in one particular state is more easily remembered in another state. I had a friend in college who, when he got drunk, he would talk about giraffes. Just he loved giraffes. He would just go on and on and on about their long necks and how beautiful giraffes were. And the thing is, because he always talked about giraffes when he was drunk, when he got drunk again, when he drank any kind of alcohol later on, he'd think about giraffes again. Because when something has happened in a particular state, the next time you're in that state, those are the memories that come back to you. There's also something called place-based. If you actually don't mind writing this down, place-based memory. They did an interesting study with scuba divers where they gave half the scuba divers, they had to memorize some foreign words on land, and then half of them were given these words while they were underwater, right? And then a few days later, they were given a test over those words, but half of them took the test on land, and half of them took the test underwater. This is kind of weird. What they found is that if you learned on land, you tested better on land. And if you learned underwater, you tested better underwater. That where you are when you're learning, it actually impacts what you're able to remember in the future, which is kind of cool. Now, sometimes we have trouble remembering things. We get things mixed up. So I want to talk about 2 ways that we can get information mixed up, okay? And these 2 ways use these same roots from earlier, pro and retro. So both of these are times that you forget stuff. Well, pro and retro refer to, are you forgetting old stuff or new stuff? So retro, again, means old. Retroactive interference is when you forget something old. Proactive interference is when you forget something that's a little bit newer. It's more recent. An example, I want you to imagine that you're dating somebody. For some of you, you're going to have to imagine really hard. Imagine you're dating someone, and you keep getting your current girlfriend mixed up with your ex-girlfriend. Okay? You keep forgetting their names. You keep getting them mixed up. So, if you call your current girlfriend by your ex's name, ooh, that's bad, right? If I called Kelsey Ashley, right, I'm forgetting my newer, more recent wife's name. I'm forgetting Kelsey's name. That would be proactive interference. I'm forgetting the recent information because of some old name. Now, in contrast, if I'm trying to remember my high school girlfriend, 15 years ago, I'm forgetting old information if I can't remember her name. If I say, oh yeah, back when I was at North Gwinnett, I used to date Kelsey. That's not right. I have forgotten the old girlfriend's name. We call that retroactive interference. Retro, forgetting the old. Pro, forgetting the more recent, the newer stuff. Here's another example. A student here learned French in middle school, and now they're taking a Spanish class. Proactive would be they're having trouble remembering the recent stuff. They have trouble on their Spanish test because that old French keeps jumping in their mind. In contrast, on the bottom here, they learned French in middle school, now they're studying Spanish. If they try to think back to their old French vocabulary, if they keep forgetting the old French stuff, that is retro interference. They're forgetting the old because of the more recent thing. So retro, forgetting the old, pro, forgetting the more recent. We'll go over that in class as well. Let's talk about some other ways that your memory can mess up. Have y'all ever played the game telephone before? Right? Where like I tell one person something and then they tell someone else and they tell someone else and they tell someone else. Does that game ever work perfectly? If it starts out as like a long sentence or paragraph or story, as it keeps getting retold, what happens to it? Well, a few different things happen. First off, sometimes information gets leveled, simplified, cut out, right? A 40-word story becomes a 10-word story. Additionally, sometimes certain details get sharpened, overemphasized. Something that maybe actually wasn't an important part of the story, we pay too much attention to it. We call that sharpening. Sometimes parts of your story get changed. The word to assimilate means to change. So sometimes you'll tell a story and a character might change, or a consequence might change, or an outcome, or a setting might change, usually because you're making some stereotypes or assumptions about something in the story. We call that assimilation. We're going to do an activity in class where we're kind of going to play a game of telephone, and we're going to see how leveling, sharpening, and assimilation happen. How information gets left out, we over-focus on certain details, or sometimes we actually just like change things completely. Okay? And y'all know this happens with gossip and rumors. Leveling, sharpening, assimilation. Something else that can happen with memory that's a problem. Sometimes we don't actually want to talk about things from the past. We bury those things deep within us. We call this repression. When we talked about Freud, Psycho Freud, right? He's the guy who came up with the psychodynamic or the psychoanalytic theory. He said that memories are not always reliable because sometimes we will bury things into our subconscious. We don't want to think about a time we have messed up or failed or been hurt or hurt somebody. So we try and push those things down. That's actually a memory problem. And there's a lot of interesting research about trauma and abuse and bullying, especially if it happens when you're a kid, how that can impact your memory. And people can sort of block out whole parts of their life because they don't want to think about these painful moments. That's a retrieval problem. It's a memory issue. Okay. Quick check for understanding. Think back to all these different types of memory issues. And then the last slide of notes. There's some fascinating research on how bad our memories can be. The researcher's name was Elizabeth Loftus. And she would show people a video of a car accident. And then half of the folks would be asked, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? And half of the folks would be asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? And she would then ask them a variety of questions about the video. So she shows the video, she asks them a leading question. She uses the word smashed. And then she might say, how fast were the cars going? Or she might say, was there broken glass afterwards? And what she found was that when she asked a leading question using a word like smashed, that more people pictured broken glass. They were positive there had been broken glass. And more people said that the cars were going faster than they really were. Their estimates of the car speed went way up. In contrast, if someone said, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other, way more of those people said, there was no broken glass. They weren't actually going that fast. It was more of a bump, a light tap, right? The way that we ask questions, it actually impacts people's memories. So lawyers do this. If you watch any of those crime shows, right, you know the way they ask the question, it's not just them trying to trick people. People's memories can actually change. People can swear that they saw things that weren't actually there simply because of the way that people have talked to them about the event afterwards. So your memory, it's pretty impressive the things you can remember, but memory is not perfect, okay? Make sure you can answer these questions. We'll go over them in class. Appreciate you all. Take your time, jot the notes down. Peace out.